a warm welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us for another Hexaview Technologies webinar. My name is George Christodoulou. I'm a senior executive with Hexaview, and I will be the moderator for today's discussion. And we have a very exciting topic to cover today. We're talking about the rise of generative AI and how it is transforming creativity and shaping the future. It is my privilege to introduce our guest speaker, Brennan Woodruff. Brennan, welcome, and thank you for accepting our invitation. We look forward to exploring this very fascinating topic with an industry insider like yourself.
Of course, thanks for having me, guys. It's I'm located in San Francisco, so it's a little early here, but I think we're going to cover some really exciting ground. So again, thank you guys for having me. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today.
Awesome. So Brennan is the co-founder of GoCharlie. GoCharlie, it's an all-in-one AI content creation platform. Drawing on a professional career spanning over a decade at renowned companies like KPMG, Uber, and SoftBank, Brennan ventured into the realm of entrepreneurship when he co-founded GoCharlie, which is a startup focused on the convergence of AI and creative content generation. So without any further ado, let me dive into the world of generative AI. It's also called Gen AI. I'll use the terms interchangeably. And we'll explore all the exciting things that the AI holds for our future. Brennan, let me begin by sharing some interesting facts here. So ChatGPT, arguably the most popular Gen AI platform, acquired 1 million users in just 5 days after launching in November of 2022. So for comparison, it took Instagram approximately 2.5 months to reach 1 million downloads. That was in 2010, approximately 13 years earlier. And Twitter, it took Twitter 2 years to reach 1 million users, and that was in 2006. Now, incredibly, it is estimated that ChatGPT hit 100 million monthly active users 3 months after its launch in January 2023, which makes it the fastest growing application in history. Now, to put that in perspective, it took the telephone, any guesses, 75 years to reach 100 million subscribers per month. So clearly, the rate of adoption of new technologies is accelerating. We're all bearing witness to this transformation. So to start with, given this meteoric rise of generative AI, maybe you can help explain in general terms, what is generative AI and how does it work?
Yeah, and I think what those stats are kind of testament to, George, is just like the power that is social media now and how connected we all are. Like, I think things can spread like wildfire very quickly. We've seen massive examples of that even in the past week. So I think AI is this topic that everybody loves, but then we have these distribution channels where people can get access to everything. But let's walk it back to like, what is generative AI? So the best way to think about generative AI is past artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence has been around forever. Well, relative to me, forever. I don't know, relative to some people on the call, we'll find out. But generative AI, the difference between old AI and new AI is really that it can create net new information. So past AI has been focused on analyzing past information and deriving insights in process automation. That's actually some of what I focused on when I was investing at SoftBank. And then this AI is more delivering creative things, so creating net new capabilities. So best way to think about generative AI is that it creates new information.
I see. So let's dive deeper into the current state of technology, specifically the technology advancements that make generative AI possible. Could you give us a broad overview of where things stand today?
Totally. So this new wave of AI is actually several years in the making. So I think where it all really started, this new wave of explosion, was the Transformer paper back in 2017. So I won't bore you guys with technical architectures of how AI models work at that level of specificity, but the people that published that paper ultimately went on to found OpenAI, found Adept, which is another AI lab, found Anthropic, which is another AI lab that's starting to get some prestige. But ultimately, that was the architecture that was used to create GPT-2, which most people don't even know what GPT-2 is, much less what GPT-3 is. GPT-3 was a model that was available via API only for the better part of 2 years. And then we got to this chat GPT craze that you saw starting at the beginning of last year. And so where we're currently at is, I think, a couple exciting points. One is that OpenAI realized that the real money was at the application layer. So there was a company called Jasper that made $100 million in 1 year.
Yeah. Wow.
Because they were the only ones that were able to talk with the API of OpenAI and made it usable, applied it to a very specific problem. And so OpenAI kind of saw that and said, hey, there's a lot more money at that level to fund our research, so let's go bananas. So that's another important thing to think about is the people releasing these technologies, they're not really driven by pure profit. They're more focused on, we want to do really cool research and then have people apply that technology. Now, I actually think that we're starting to get to this place where we're deciding between generalist models and domain specific models. So I kind of view ChatGPT as like the Craigslist moment of AI, to put it in very layman's terms. So you have this generalist model that's pretty good at doing a lot of things, but it doesn't have the technical depth to go deep on a specific topic. And so what I think you're going to start to see over the course of the next several months, several years, months in AI land is like a year, it seems. But you're going to see more domain specific models. So models for marketing, models for finance, models for healthcare. And so you're going to start to see this cutting off of different parts of what ChatGPT can do and having more technical depth. But all of that is to say that I think we're still very early in this new wave of AI. And I don't think OpenAI is going to be the end all be all company there, but I can be proven wrong. That's a prediction.
Interesting. So to understand the advantages that Gen AI is giving us compared to other AI technologies, maybe you can touch a little bit about how we train a model, just in very high terms. I don't get into the technical details, but I think it's important for later in the conversation for the audience to understand why there is excitement and concern at the same time. Why is this technology so revolutionary that is creating such a powerful impact, and it has people like Elon Musk and everyone else saying, wow, we got to be careful?
Yeah, so I'll try to explain it in the least technical way that I can, because I think AI doomerism is a bit overblown, but we can get into that a little bit later in the conversation. But the way that these models are trained, I like to think of this in the analogy of sports. So I know we might have some soccer fans on here or football fans, depending on where you're living in the world. I'm a basketball guy. So I like to think of this in terms of like specific tasks that I'm teaching the model. So basically what you do is you accumulate a data set of the types of things that you would want a model to do. So if you want it to produce text, you would create a data set of the types of text things that you would want it to create. You flow that through this model. A model, for the benefit of everyone on this call, is just an algorithm. It's a very advanced algorithm, very advanced statistical distribution that predicts in the future. And based upon all the text that you run through it, you basically give it a thumbs up, thumbs down if the outputs that it's creating are good. And then eventually you put the cap on that model and you say this model's ready to go. And so ultimately these models are not actually intelligent per se. They're purely prediction machines. So based upon the words you're giving it, the context you're giving it at the beginning, it's predicting. Let's think about that in a sports analogy. It's basically like I'm teaching a model how to shoot a free throw in basketball. And like it gets really, really good at shooting free throws because it's doing millions and billions of reps. But it doesn't know what a free throw is. It doesn't know what points are. It doesn't know what teammates are, why you shoot a free throw. So these models are very good at predicting and doing a task based upon some context, but they don't inherently know what they are doing. So why that's creating this current craze is that it creates all sorts of opportunities for misinformation. There's many people using this AI technology as a search engine. I actually don't think it's that great if you're using it for a search engine, because models are trained at a point in time. So most models, for instance, trained in 2021. we're in 2023 now. In the last week, there's been a nuts amount of information happening, a nuts amount of events. None of that information would be included in a model's training data set. So anything you ask a model about those events, it's going to be wrong. It's just going to produce information that it thinks is statistically correlated with that inquiry. So that's kind of the way that I would think about these new models. Is they're very good at being mimetic. They're not very good at being fact bases from that context.
So these models, especially when we're talking about the difference between, let's say, version 3 and 4, they can only be refreshed during training cycles. They're not constantly being updated. Is that what I'm hearing?
So it's a great question, right? One of the fallacies of these very large models. So perhaps the way that most people consider model size is a term called parameters. I think of parameters like ingredients for any sort of dish that you're trying to create. So for instance, GPT-3 was 175 billion parameters. Let's say that we have a chicken parm recipe that we want to create, right? You only need a certain amount of ingredients to make the perfect chicken parm recipe. Now you could have less ingredients and not actually make the chicken parm that you want, or you could have more ingredients and it turns into a gobbledygook and doesn't look anything like the original. So model size is based on parameters. But if you have a giant model with a lot of parameters, it's very expensive to retrain. It's very expensive to retool it. So the likelihood that you're going to retrain these models on new data rather than just build a new model is very small. That's why I think small models that are domain specific will win in the future, is because it costs less to train. So you could continuously update these models over time, and it would still cost less than one training run on a big model. So sorry if I made anyone hungry with that analogy, but that's the way I like to think about it.
That's a very good explanation. Thank you. So I wanted to tell everyone, so we will be taking questions. If I can ask you, Abhishek, try and funnel the questions to me through Teams chat, my private Teams chat. So I will be taking questions from the audience. Hopefully, I'll be covering a lot of your questions here through my research and the kind of questions that I was able to conceive prior to the call. All right, so let me interject here another interesting data point which I came across during my research, right? So according to a report published by McKinsey and Company, this is up on their website, by the way, because it was just published about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we're talking very, very current information. And the title of it is The Economic Potential of Generative AI. They said that approximately 75% of the value that generative AI delivers falls across 4 key areas: customer operations, marketing and sales, software engineering, and R&D. So the most common use cases where AI has the ability to make an impact is to support interactions with customers. We're talking about those AI bots that pop up on your on a website and say, "Can I help you?" You know, maybe I have the answer. That's a great application, obviously. Then there is generative creative content. We'll come to that. We're going to talk a lot about that. And I thought the other 2 cases were interesting. And in simple terms, what they said is AI, generative AI, is really good at drafting computer code from natural language inputs, right? So whether they're doing it for R&D purposes or for software engineering, and we've all kind of seen where you have Copilot, I think, from Microsoft, or there are tools now that can help you write code because of the way you explained it, right? Because it is trained on so many parameters and other people's code, it is able then to derive code. But here's where I find, do you want to comment on that before I ask my question?
Yeah. Wait, let's ask the question. I guess the one comment I'll make is, like, it is very interesting how training on code can actually make AI models better at understanding normal language. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's hit the question and we'll see if we come out with that.
So Charlie brands itself as an AI marketing assistant, right? Your focus as a company aligns perfectly with the findings of the McKinsey report, and presumably you were aligned many months before the industry caught up with the trends. What I found interesting here is I could make an argument that the story of Charlie is the journey of a successful Silicon Valley startup, one focused on generative AI. So can you take us back to the beginning? How did you guys set out to create a company in the AI space and specifically around marketing content generation?
Yeah. So a real quick comment there. I think it's funny that McKinsey study doesn't say that consulting is going to be one of the applications. I actually think that AI could be applied to consulting, but maybe you don't want to erode your own business with your own study you've invested in. But this is a separate discussion. Biases abound in humans and AI models. So maybe how we got started. I was at SoftBank's Vision Funds at the time, and I came to this conclusion I wanted to leave. And I was consulting a friend that did an AI PhD about early stage startup packages, and unknowingly, I was actually consulting my co-founder, Kostas Hatalis. He is an AI PhD. He co-founded the company. He was the one that originally had the idea that like there was this formula to making great marketing content, and if you could derive that formula based upon different attributes for content creation, that you could make content that was not only more engaging, but that you could also offer this at a very fractional version of the price that is currently being charged. You think about agencies, you think about all sorts of types of content creation. Heck, if you're a small business and you want to create content, you want someone that just knows marketing content. That's kind of where we all started. Was we knew that there was this opportunity to create AI that was generally creative, that was able to create net new information. But the tricky part is like, where do you apply that? And so we sat there and said, what's going to be the biggest opportunity? Because the biggest opportunity means big returns, bigger application, and for us, most importantly, impact. So both my parents were entrepreneurs. They had relationship-driven businesses. And I saw firsthand when the pandemic hit, like how relationship-driven businesses dry up if you don't have a digital presence. And so we endeavored to make a tool where people could use a easy to use AI interface to make content rapidly and rapidly iterate. And so that's how Charlie was born. Maybe a fun fact for the people on the call though, we were originally called Gaudium AI, which I bet I would ask all of you to spell that and you wouldn't have any idea how to spell it, much less how to say it when you saw it. So Charlie is actually Kostas's dog. So there is a real Charlie behind this crazy AI puppy that you see.
Yeah, I saw his picture on your website. So
he's our chief puppy officer.
He's there, one of the founders, right?
Exactly.
So obviously you go to a lot of conferences. You're very much in demand these days. What are some other applications and use cases you see for Gen AI? You know, what are you seeing personally apart from the creative marketing aspect of it? That you know, these are hot areas or they're growing areas within the space.
Yeah. So I think one of the comments I wanted to make about that McKinsey study is I think it's important to understand why they're highlighting those areas versus other areas. So if I think about the areas that weren't mentioned there, one is finance and healthcare. And so for both of those, the main reasons that I see they're not highlighting that is one, the level of reliance that you need from these systems in order to make financial statements, to have accurate books, to generate accurate financial insights. You can't have the hallucinations that we talked about. You can't have the AI just making stuff up. Same thing with healthcare. You make stuff up, someone might die. The other part of that is the data privacy concerns. So many applications are built on OpenAI, and so their data is being sent to a third party. Most IT departments I've talked to, that's like a huge no-no. And especially if you're in the EU, that can definitely be a big issue as it pertains to GDPR. So it's interesting that they didn't highlight those industries. I do think that we're going to have a lot of application there in the future, but there's some things that need to be figured out. I think the point that I would see Gen AI being applied to a lot more is right now I think we're in the state of applying generative AI to what we already do. And I think that's important because we're making things cheaper, faster. It's allowing you to bring things in-house that you previously wouldn't. But what I think the fundamental opportunity is going to be is just reimagining workflows in their entirety. So for instance, one of the workflows that we previously saw podcast creators having is they would create a podcast episode and then they would have to go to a transcription service, get it transcribed, make sure that was accurate, then summarize that transcription, and then use that summary to drive social media posts, blog creation, web page creation, all of that. We introduced a feature called content repurposing in Charlie where you can do all of that in one step. And so I think the more fundamental opportunity is how do we run an organization or a business where you can do some of these workflows that used to go cross-functional, where you can do some of these things that used to take 5, 10, 20 people to do with one person. So I think that's the first part. It's just reimagining rules-based workflows. I think the second area that you're going to see a lot more of is just interaction between individuals. So what would you do if you had a digital twin? I think that's one of the really cool things that I start to think about. There's a question of, do we want digital twins? But you can take a bot and train it on your Slack information and have it be a digital version of you that's responsive 24/7 to your coworkers. So I know many of us like to get into deep work. I'm always getting pinged on Slack these days, trying to think about different ways to grow the business. What if you had a digital twin that could be your chief of staff effectively? So I think there's a lot of application on the account executive, the digital twinning that hasn't really been figured out quite yet because I think our egos aren't willing to release that the bot might be able to do what we do. But I think it's the really big productivity gain that we're going to see here in the future.
Yeah, you sort of touched a little bit on some of the features that are available on GoCharlie. I was fascinated that the first time I tried some of your tools, and I realized that I don't remember the name of the specific tool, but you can put a URL for any YouTube video, and it gives you a summary, an entire outline. And this video could be 30 minutes, 45 minutes long, and in just a few seconds you get a summary, nicely structured. Can you talk about that? I thought that was a very good use case for your product.
Yeah, so it was a fascinating revelation. We initially did it to help YouTube creators create show notes, help podcast creators create show notes. And what we found is that people actually were using that for education. It was this like amazing educational hack where you could take these long 5-hour videos and just derive what are the most important points. And for me, that was a big deal because like now the learning application of this type of technology is massive. I've had professors that have their entire library of courses on YouTube use this for creating syllabuses or thinking through new information or saying, hey student, I know you couldn't attend this session, here's a summary, shoot that off as an email. Me personally, I use it to just digest everything on Y Combinator's website. So I just feed every video in there. I'm like, okay, what are the highlights I need to know? Now, some people might view that as cheating, but I think that there's maybe 5 to 10 relevant moments for each 10 to 30 minutes of video content that you really want to hone in on. And so this is giving us that capability to summarize everything. I don't know if there's any 4-minute books fans in the pod or in this webinar, but I think that's where initially we derived the idea. It's like, how do you derive the most important points? And it's kind of like an interesting thing to think about. Like, how do you summarize Harry Potter? Or how do you summarize like an entire course worth of content to its most simple points? How do you even approach that problem? So I find educational benefits being huge, but I don't think we're seeing them applied as much because it's really scaring current educational institutions.
I saw it as a Cliff's Notes version of any YouTube video, right? I mean, there were Cliff's Notes for the big books like War and Peace or whatnot, and you could get the little summary and the key points. And all this content that happened on digital media, though, didn't have a Cliff's Notes version. And I think your tool gave us those Cliff Notes, and I can point the URL in a few seconds. I get back the outline, and I see whether it's interesting to me to watch the whole video or I want to go somewhere else. I think that's a great application for the technology right there. Okay, so let's turn our attention to the competitive, and some would say, very crowded landscape of generative AI. I'd like to, well, first, and I'll take a question from the audience here, which is related. So let's start. Who are the key players in the space? Obviously, we spoke about OpenAI. I think Google with Bard is trying to make an entry. You mentioned Anthropic. Tell us a little bit about Anthropic is very interesting, right? So it puts a human framework around what the AI can and cannot do. So I don't know if a lot of our audience understands that there are variations here, and some of them are very interesting. Do you want to speak to some of those?
Totally. And so I'm going to point everyone to a resource that I found invaluable in explaining this industry and getting my mind wrapped around it. And so there's a venture fund called NFX. A guy named James Currier over there has written this article about the layers of the gen tech industry. And so there's 5 layers. It starts the furthest away from you and I and goes all the way to what you and I would interact with. So the first layer is like the foundational model layer, the generalist model. This is where the GPT-3s, the Chat GPT, the GPT-4s, Bards, Anthropic's Claude, that's where all of those sit. Then the second layer is specific models. So think of this as like Charlie and other models that are Bloomberg GPT, other models that are trained for specific domains of expertise. So we focus on marketing. Bloomberg GPT was focused on financials. That's the second layer. So not as big as the generalist models, but still very capable of executing the tasks. Then there's a third layer that's very highly local models. The best way to think about this is like, what would a model look like that was between you and your doctor? So for instance, like only information that you're sharing with single people or maybe within a team in an organization, that's the third layer. And that's where you get proprietary data. That's where you get the applications that wouldn't be available to those other models. Fourth layer, this is the infrastructure operating system API layer. So all the layers below it are usually fed through an API. And that's how people access this information. And then, of course, the fifth level, what's most tangible to all of us, is the application layer. So the application layer is where the Jaspers, the Charlies, the pretty much any other AI application you're using, that's where you and I are interacting with the AI. But there's a bunch of layers beneath it. Now, couple predictions here that you didn't ask for, but you're going to get is I think that for players to be successful in the long run, they're going to have to play at multiple layers. So I think that's where you saw OpenAI jump into Chat GPT, is they saw the money was at the application layer, much to the detriment of Jasper, unfortunately, and many other copywriting apps. But that's where you saw OpenAI jumping into that layer. So now Claude is being made available in an app layer. And so the important point to note there is that like there's a software component to any of these AI models. You're not interacting directly with the AI model. You're either interacting with an application that has an API or a very simple interface that allows you to interact with it. Now, you mentioned what are some of the other players, right? So you have OpenAI at that base level, you have Google, you have Anthropic. Anthropic has hung their hat on this concept called constitutional AI, which is effectively you make a constitution, the AI reads it, and then the AI directs and rewards the model based upon that constitution. The way that other models are typically trained is called RLHF, reinforcement learning human feedback. So basically you and I are voting, telling the AI model if it's good or bad. That's why you see the thumbs up, thumbs down on all the AI apps. That's how they train them. But Anthropic has taken more of a model of AI is going to train it. So it's a rules-based system, which I think allows for a little bit more control, but you're likely getting to the same level of results. But this is also why Anthropic didn't release a model the way that ChatGPT did. ChatGPT, they were like, let's just release this and people will feedback it into the model that we need it to be. Anthropic was like, we're going to let the AI do that. A couple other big players, Stability AI. They released Stable Diffusion, an image generation model in conjunction with some German researchers. Runway ML is doing video, so text to video. But I think the more interesting way to think about this whole industry is we're now using English as a way to interact with technology or whatever language that it is that you're using. So I think regardless of the layer that you're playing in, we're playing in a couple, we're playing in 2 and 5, but regardless of the layers that you're playing in, from a typical user perspective, the way to think about it is you can now interact with technology in your own language. Instead of you having to learn to code, the coder has now learned how to speak English. It's kind of a cool way to think about it.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly AI can respond to other languages. I thought it was exclusively an English language, function, but I have seen it work very well in French and in other languages. So it's only going to get better, which is actually global first. It's a nice thing that we have this global first language, which is being trained in native languages uh, inherently, and not going from English to a translated version. This is kind of the future, definitely. Let me staying within the topic. I'll mention a couple of questions here from the audience, and then move on to another topic. So, one of the questions has to do with, well, most of these questions I'm seeing here have to do with AI and other industries, right? So, for example, how can AI be used in the future in the gaming industry, and what sort of opportunities can it create?
Totally. So I'll just name a few of the really cool applications I've been seeing so far. First is just game asset creation. So I used to be a World of Warcraft person. I'm being very vulnerable and telling you all that. That's what I was in high school. And so all those assets, the swords, the potions, all of the enemies, everything, your character armor, all of that can be created by generative AI now. I think Unreal Engine is doing some really amazing things where you can generate entire worlds. This is actually one of the reasons that I feel that Meta, instead of focusing so much on the metaverse, started to turn towards generative AI, because generative AI is necessary to have self-creating worlds in the metaverse. Separately, I've also saw game scripting be a heavy part of this new text-to-text generation. But I think probably the coolest application is providing non-playable characters with a brain. So there's a company called In-World AI where you could put C-3PO from Star Wars and you could ask him questions about his opinion about Darth Vader based upon the programming that you put into the character. You could also teach it to breakdance. You could teach it to do all these things. And so I think for the gaming industry, I think they're actually leading the charge in a lot of this generative AI stuff. They're creating bots that have personalities. They're creating assets for the game. Like, the cost of creating a game is going down, and I think it's going to create a very beautiful renaissance in game creation.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the other Silicon Valley behemoth here, the Apple, right? That recently Apple introduced Apple Vision Pro. Could you see any applications of Apple Vision Pro and AI, generative AI? For example, could it act as the ChatGPT front? Could we see a world where this mixed reality, right? It's not anymore virtual 100%. It's kind of a blend between what's in your physical space and what is in your, goggles. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So Vision Pro is awesome. I'm so excited for it to come about. I think so. If I think about it, like, Apple had Siri before anybody else. They had like a big lead there. We actually, the original developers of Siri actually invested in us, which I'm super excited to have on our cap table. But I would imagine Siri is where you're going to see the most investment in AI for them. I thought it was very clever that the Vision Pro discussion didn't really focus on AI as much. It was like, we're focused on hardware because that's what we do best. And the hardware becomes a platform for generative AI. So I would think many of these generative AI applications that we're already seeing just become an interface in that, like, crazy ability to create as many screens as you want and use technologies there. But I see Siri being like the avenue that they inject generative AI into it. But interestingly enough, the M1 and M2 chips of Apple can actually run a large language model locally. So if you're tech driven and you want to learn how to put a language model on your computer, you can go pull one off of Hugging Face, put it on your computer, and try to run it there.
Wow.
I actually think in the future, there's a concept that keeps me up at night and it keeps me thinking quite a bit, is like, I've always thought that hyper personalization is where all of this goes. But there's this question of, is there a platform that ultimately drives the hyper personalization? Because you have to have certain amounts of data about someone to be able to hyper personalize. So is that done at the company level with their own technology? Or is there some filtration device at the end user side that is filtering everything that's inbound to you to your preferences? So maybe I like Twitter threads, maybe I like short articles, and I just have an AI model deciphering everything coming into me in that way. And Apple seems the most poised to do it through either Siri or Vision Pro because they control the gateways. So I think there's some interesting questions about how that will look long term.
We'll take more questions from the audience. Let me move on here. So GoCharlie recently received a significant investment from a Silicon Valley venture firm, SRI International. I think you alluded to that. Your co-founder and CEO, Kostas Hatalis, stated that we believe the future of AI will make use of domain-specific models to create personalized content at scale. Can you tell us more about your partnership with SRI and perhaps touch on what are domain-specific models? I think you mentioned them earlier. How do they work? What are they?
Yeah. So really exciting partnership. I mean, honestly, that was a pinch myself moment when we were able to sign that deal. So it's super exciting. But coming into this, the partnership that we're working with them on is twofold. So we've already developed our own large language model, which is no small feat for a four-person team. But then what we're doing with them is introducing the capability to be multimodal. So multimodal is a word that you're hearing a lot, but basically what it means is you can take more modalities than just one into a model and create more than one out. So
what
for
is a
instance,
modality? I have to ask the question for you.
So exactly. So multimodal has meant like four different things throughout my career. Uber, it was one thing. Here it's another thing. The way to think about multimodal for this is a content medium. So like text and images are different modalities. Video would be another modality. Audio would be another modality. It's almost like different senses. Like that's the way that I could kind of think about it. Vision would be another modality. Coding would be another modality. Although coding kind of falls in the tech sphere, but that's a philosophical difference. So what we're doing with them is creating a model where you can put text and images in and get text and images out. Or you can just put text in, get text and images out. So think about this from a marketing perspective. You could say, hey, I need a campaign for Instagram that's 6 posts, takes my brand assets into consideration and creates the creative as well as the text. We'll be able to do that from one model. So that's one aspect of what we're working on with them. But the other aspect, which is very important and I don't think has been discussed enough, is these models, as we discussed earlier, are frozen at a point in time. They're frozen so that we don't like to retrain them. But what you can do is you can unfreeze a portion of them. And so that unfrozen portion could talk with your own data warehouse or could talk with the web so that it's bringing that information in. So what you have is a model that can be customized to you on a current events basis without you having to spend the money on fine tuning or without you having to do some super complex prompting. So that's something that we're working on with them. It'd be a first of its kind way where you can adapt a model to you in real time. So super excited about that partnership and what it enables because it allows us to serve our service at a lot less of a cost. It allows us to have better quality results across multiple content mediums at once. But I think it's really going to set us up for some very interesting things in the second part of this year.
Excellent. So when we talk about a company typically wants to build as wide of a moat as they can to protect their IP or I guess their competitive advantage. What are some of the things that you guys are doing in such a competitive market? To the degree you can discuss, we don't want any corporate secrets here. But what does a company in the middle of all of this innovation do to protect their competitiveness, their IP?
Yeah, so I think it's important to highlight in new industries, the moats are still being figured out. I think there's a lot of people that think that proprietary data is the moat. I don't think it's going to be long term. I really think that in this industry right now, constant innovation is the answer to building any sort of moat. Then I think the second thing that we think about as a company is like owning your customers. So if you're just a software layer on top of OpenAI, you run the risk of the next time that they release an updated model that your software is useless. There was an entire Y Combinator batch, literally a week before demo day, just got rolled by the release of the next model. And so they had to figure out what they were going to do because plugins basically automated their whole business away. So if you don't own your customers, you don't have your own underlying tech, you're not a full stack company, I don't think that you're going to be successful in the long run here. So that's another way we're thinking about building moats. And then the third is, stickiness. I think stickiness is a big moat that you can think about. And what I mean by stickiness is like getting a model into someone's infrastructure, customizing it to their needs. And then the most important part that most current systems don't do, but our system will do, is learn you over time. So it will constantly be updating and learning you and learning your workflows, learning your system, learning your business, being fed data. And that ultimately, I think, will be the longest term moat, is being able to embed your technology into an organization such that it can learn you over time. I think about this like Spotify playlist, right? I was a SoundCloud guy for a long time, didn't want to get rid of my membership because I had all those playlists there. And then eventually the tech for Spotify was so good, I migrated over. But that's the way that we're thinking about it. But you can't be sticky if you can't be embedded in someone's organization and be customized to their needs. So that's how we think about innovation, owning your customers, customization.
Excellent, excellent. How can individuals or organizations begin to leverage generative AI in their own projects or initiatives? What are some practical use cases you have seen from the people you talk to that say, I can use it here, this is going to make a difference or give me a competitive advantage against, my field of competitors?
Totally. So I talk to a lot of companies about this because a lot of companies are like, we need AI. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you want to use it for? And they're like, I don't know. And like, that's that's great for me because I can just sell you the world and say that I'm going to deliver something. But I endeavor to be a less nefarious person and just say, okay, well, let's think about this. What takes you the most amount of time to do right now? What takes you, or what's a rules-based system or decision tree-based system that you might need? Or where are there touch points that are super repetitive that you could introduce AI to? I think those are the three areas that I tell people to focus on. It takes you the most time, repetitive tasks, all that sort of stuff. Now, an interesting use case that I've not seen advertised as much is I just use AI as a replacement for meetings. So this is a really interesting way to think about it. Like, instead of going to my CEO who's building our AI about some marketing issue, I can sit there and just talk to model and be like, okay, this is my budget. I'm thinking about doing it this way. This is the way that I want to grow. What channel should I focus on? So I can literally replace meetings with just talking with the AI. Now, are the results going to be like outstanding and phenomenal? No, but oftentimes I have to talk through a problem to get to the answer that I was eventually going to get to. But if I'm not doing that, I'm not going to. So that's an easy way. Just have it be a thought partner. Obviously, don't put confidential information in there unless it's something on your own rails. That's a very important part. That's one space. Another space is email. Email is like the biggest thing that I've seen this being applied to, is responding to emails. You paste an email in, you respond to the email. It's another way to do it. Another area that I've seen people focus this in on is research. Now, we highlighted why research isn't good, but there are certain tools that are infusing internet research with AI model capabilities. Perplexity.AI is one version of this. We do it in our tool with Charlie the researcher. So it's basically integrating web results. But I think it's a really good research tool because it doesn't give you just like this web page and you have to go figure it out. It gives you an idea of like the actual underlying answer. It gives you an idea of the actual information in a more summarized format, a much better research experience in my mind. So those are some easy wins to implement it.
Got it. Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine. He is French. He works for an American company, and he told me he uses AI for compiling email responses for his colleagues in the US because it gets the the tone and the the cultural aspects of a response that he couldn't ever imagine, not having lived there. So that's that. I'm glad you said email is a great application, because I know that for sensitive emails, he always asks ChatGPT to compile a draft. Obviously, he touches up on it, but that's a great application. All right, let's switch gears now for the last 10 minutes, and I'm going to try and take some more questions from the audience. Let's talk about the future. Where all this is headed to? How do you see generative AI evolving over the next 5 to 10 months, let's say, but let's say, long term, and what impact might this technology have on society and business in general?
Yeah, I actually spend a lot of time thinking about this particular topic. So let's think about how the technology evolves, and then we'll talk about second order implications of all that. So maybe specifically to the marketing spheres first. I think that the remedial, meticulous tasks that are very repetitive, I think those go away first. I think that AI right now is a vending machine experience where you put one thing in or you press one button and you get one thing out. So I think the next evolution is going to be one in and many out. So we're thinking about this from a campaign perspective. You put in some brand information in what you need, the AI will go create all of those brand assets for an entire campaign all at once. The next evolution, I think, becomes proactive AI. So you're going to have AI that understands you enough to deliver things before you even think that you might need them. This could be similar to the push notification from Uber that's like trying to tell you to order your guilty pleasure on Uber Eats, something like that. I think the AI will evolve to be a lot more proactive in terms of its creation capabilities. And then after proactive is where you're going to get to autonomy. I don't think autonomy is coming for another 5 years, maybe 3 to 5 years if I put on the early side. But think about autonomy as like a system that can run itself to achieve a specific goal. That's where the concept of agents come in that everybody keeps talking about. That's where the concept of like full scale automation, that's where you get into leaner enterprises. But I think like everybody's really scared about leaner enterprises. But I think the beauty of this is actually that like there's more businesses that are possible. It's never been easier to start a business. Now that level of risk to start it is a little bit difficult. But what if you had an AI that could just run a side hustle for you? Like in today's day and world, I hate that you have to have a side hustle to survive, but that's where we're going to get in the next 3 to 5 years. You can say, hey, AI, make a business about this specific product idea that I have, and it'll just go to work for you. And you'll be able to check in with it, much like a coworker. But I think we're just going to have this much more rich interaction with technology. Now, second order impacts of that. I think SEO is going to go through a massive transformation. Chat-based AI is chat-based search is going to be this fundamental shift. But when I start to think about it long term, I'm like, well, how fundamental of a shift? Because you're still going to have people wanting to buy biases in the AI model to uprank. So maybe it's just going to be the top 2 results are coming instead of the top 10. But then what does that mean for SEO freelancers? That means they're probably going to have to expand their services. Well, I'm here to tell you that AI can do that for you. So I think there's this safety net that AI is actually introducing as it's transforming industries. I do think in the long run, it's not too far off to think that you're going to have an AI as a coworker or even an AI as a boss, because algorithms run most of the platforms that we already use. But I think in the future, digital twinning will be a lot bigger. I think you're going to see a lot smaller businesses that can do a lot more powerful things, leaner teams, one subject matter expert that's executing with a whole bunch of tools. Not too different than what we're already doing, but just much more powerful tools capable of executing complex workflows.
Fantastic. And, I'll paraphrase a question here from the audience, but are you worried about the use of the LLM models and AI as it pertains to the job opportunities of the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be hard not to. My niece is starting college this year, and I think I've encouraged her to get into artificial intelligence. She wants to be in film, and I do think about it quite a bit. I'm fearful, but I'm also hopeful. And so this gets back to like the media portrayal of AI, and OpenAI has actually fueled the speculation for regulatory capture as well. Like these systems are very capable of doing very interesting things, but I think it's going to be, I think the upside can be so good here. Like the downside could definitely be bad. There's a non-zero chance it all goes really poorly, not with the current iteration of the technology, but maybe future iterations. But the upside could be so good. I think there's this confusion about like, do we want to be working as hard as we are? Would we prefer to be passion-driven economies? I don't know. This is getting into more of a philosophical thing, but I do worry about the pace. I think that's the biggest thing. The pace of innovation is so fast, and when the pace of innovation is that fast, there's inherently going to be casualties. There will inherently be industries that are just completely gone. There will still be a demand for human services, but the pricing of that will cease to be what it is currently, and then that derives the question of like, is that a sustainable life to live? So I think the pace of innovation is what concerns me more than like the actual replacement, because I think human labor can be repurposed, but that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, one of the speakers I saw on stage a few weeks ago said, AI can do a lot of things, but it cannot feed itself. It cannot go outside the realm of humanity. Humanity will always have to keep the power on for it. It will have to train it. It will have to. So he was sounding very positive about it and differentiated the humans that are able to, feed themselves and operate on their own versus whatever this thing ends up being. It needs to be plugged in, and it needs to feed itself, or we feed it, but it needs inputs from us. And so
Yeah.
he was saying he's not as worried as some of the other people. So it was a little bit more optimistic about it. Well, unfortunately, and this is such a great conversation. I mean, we could have filled another hour. I do want to mention one thing, and there's so many questions I didn't get to, but you mentioned your niece, and she's getting into the filmmaking. Here's one interesting stat I found. By 2030, a major blockbuster film will be released with 90% of the film generated by AI from text to video. That's what Gardner predicts. So that is a very interesting, 2030 is not that far off.
I think it'll be 2025, and I think it'll be 99%.
Wow.
The only reason it won't happen sooner is thinking about like the copyright laws, and that's like a big thing in this space. Is like, would a studio feed all of its information into a model such that it could create a new blockbuster film? I think there's so many questions about like the actors' rights there, and the producers' rights, and the executive producers' rights, and all the attribution that would have to happen with something like that. But like, I think it's going to happen sooner. I actually think a lot of the AI predictions that are like 2050, I'm like, that's going to happen in 5 years.
And we have it on record now. You probably will be correct, and Gardner will not not apologize. So, Brennan, this was a very insightful conversation. I mean, we touched on so many relevant topics, and we could easily fill another hour. Thank you again for taking the time to answer all of our questions and for sharing your insights. Really, we really appreciate it.
Of course, and anyone that didn't get their questions answered, you can find me on LinkedIn. We do a lot of consultations with enterprises right now about how to implement AI. I constantly am putting out content about it. So feel free to shoot me a DM. I'm available. But most importantly, George and Abhishek, thank you so much for having me. These are so much fun. We can definitely fill many, many hours with such a discussion.
Absolutely. So I'll mention a recording of this webinar will be made available shortly on all of our social media outlets. So please like and share if you enjoyed this presentation. We look forward to having you with us on an upcoming webinar. I would like to also thank our sponsor, Hexaview Technologies, for their investment in sharing innovative technology ideas, particularly our founder, Abhishek Talwar, Hexaview CEO, who is also on the call. Hi, Abhishek. Thank you for giving us this forum and supporting innovative discussions like this. Hexaview is a boutique technology firm established in 2010. We specialize in Salesforce automation, enterprise development, and related digital services. So with 400 engineers and global offices in New York City, Paris, Pune, and New Delhi, Hexaview helps businesses in verticals like financial services, banking, and the public sector. Yes, so thank you for also putting out the awards here. I'll mention that we have been recognized as one of the top 50 technology companies by Deloitte and Touche. And more recently, we ranked number 109 in America's 1,000 fastest growing companies by Financial Times. So thank you all. Thank you, Abhishek and Abhishek Tawar, and of course, our guest speaker, Brennan, for your time. And see you soon. Thanks, everyone.